How's it going?
Hi,
Hello.
Tamara.
Yay, good. Thank y'all for unmuting and speaking to me. Sometimes we get so caught up in the Zoom with the putting our cameras up and muting ourselves immediately in the meetings. Is there's something freeing about that, but then at the same time, I miss the camaraderie and the talking before the meeting actually starts. So we're so excited that you all are here with us this afternoon to um, and continue our discussion on advising. So last semester we had some really great R3 topics that we learned about from our colleagues across the university and actually outside of campus. Just our goal with these R3s was to plant these seeds and to hopefully as we continue on this semester that those seeds will continue to be planted and we'll have some very fruitful conversations based on some of those topics that we've discussed. A couple of things in terms of housekeeping before we get started. I wanted to definitely acknowledge two of my colleagues, Ricardo Purita and Jimmy Pastrano, for their contributions to this presentation or to our discussion. If you have any questions or comments that you don't feel acknowledging for yourself, that you would prefer that they remain anonymous, you can send them to Ricardo and he'll be sure to post them for you. He won't tell me even after the Zoom is over that you send him the comment. So feel free to send any comments to Ricardo. At the same time, we also want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. And so we encourage you to engage in the chat. We encourage you, we're going to have some breakout conversations as well as some small group breakouts, as well as some for those of you that may have joined me in the classroom, y'all know I like some interactive things. And so we're going to have a couple of interaction activities with us. So I hope that you are ready to engage today in this discussion. All right. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge the land on which we stand. One, in terms of we acknowledge the land on which we stand because it's important for us to honor the tribes, the indigenous tribes. It's also important for us to recognize the privilege and the privileges on which we operate in being here in higher education, being here literally on the land of the Miccosukee tribe of Florida, the Seminole tribe of Florida, the Appalachian Nation, and the Muskogee Creek Nation. We want to make sure that we take the time to honor their contributions to this land and to making it possible for us to be here today. Okay, so this is our first interactive activity. Have any of you done Jamboard before? Raise your hand. Tell me if you've done Jamboard. Yeah, good. A few of y'all have done Jamboard. Well, pretend you're in class for those of you that haven't. And let's get active on the Jamboard. So if you would click the link in the chat, you have a link there that will take you to a board, a blank board here. What we'd like for you to do is to add text. You can add memes, you can add visuals, you can add post-it notes. Tell us what you think the role of the advisor is. What is an advisor? As you think about the role of the advisor, I want you to think, while we know that advisors can serve multiple functions, or there are multiple realms in which you might receive or engage with an advisor. So I want you to focus your thoughts around academic advising. So, or graduate academic advising. What is the role of the graduate academic advisor? And when I talk about academic advisor, I also want you to think a little bit broadly about that, in that we have multiple people that are in our environment, in our department, that also serve in advising roles. And we'll talk a little bit more about those, but what do you think are some of the good, what is the role of an advisor? Let's not even put in good, but what's the advisor supposed to do? Put that in the chat or put that in the Jamboard for us. guide, and support. Give clear information. Good. Prepare, support, help guide the next generation of scholars and scholarly practitioners. Mhm. I should have had some music for y'all. I usually have music in class when we do these. Be a sounding board. Listening, yes. Listens and signals availability to listen. Okay, that's a distinction there. Oh, help the student self-actualize. Okay. Lots of listening and lots of guiding that you all have identified here as the major role or some of the major roles of an advisor. Oftentimes, oftentimes we conflate the role of the advisor with the role of the mentor. And we want to talk a little bit about some of those distinctions. So let's think about some of the commonalities in those relationships, whether you are an advisor or a mentor. And some of those commonalities definitely center around a common respect or communication, a connection, and some regular interactions. And I would encourage you to think about advising as just you as you would any other relationship that you would with another person. What are some of the actual functions of an advisor? And of course, this is a truncated list. If you want to learn more about some specific advisor functions and specifically some culturally relevant advisor functions, I would encourage you to listen to the R3 that was presented in fall semester. You'll learn a little bit more concrete details about that. So advisors direct, they validate, they educate, and they advocate. An advisor helps you to, or helps students to direct their path academically, making sure that they are fulfilling the requirements that they need to fulfill as it relates to their academic program of study. They validate some of the students or all of the students' choices as it helps to, I think, part of what someone mentioned here in thinking about the self-actualization of students. Advocating. I think all of the advisors on this call have probably advocated for one or any of their students throughout many of their years, and that advocacy can look very differently depending on the situation. And so advisors definitely serve as advocates. They also educate. They're not they're educating in the formal sense, of course, that they are teachers, but they're also educating in the informal sense that they are educating, as someone mentioned here in terms of the role of the advisor, and that deconstruction of the hidden curriculum. What is the hidden curriculum? What do we need to know in order to be successful in fill in the blank your particular environment? Advisors, you typically only have one advisor. There may be some co-advisors depending on your specific situation. Especially, we see this sometimes with co-advisors in dissertations or for doctoral students, but typically you only have one advisor. And again, advisors, academic, we're talking academically focused advisors. So they're focused on your academic development. And there's also some consideration for your personal development. These advisors also could become mentors. There's not a guarantee that your advisor will also be a mentor. So as you think about navigating your advising relationship, and we're talking about managing expectations, make sure that you have this discussion about with your advisor about some of these distinctions, and if they or you would want them to serve as your mentor. So what are mentors? What do mentors provide? Mentors are those, they guide. They are that process that serve as the kind of they've gone through this process before you, and so they can help you to navigate some of those potential pitfalls. They can also serve as coaches and help you to operate or perform at your best. They connect you with others and connect you with resources and other individuals that might be a part of their network or even outside of their own networks. So creating those connections for you to help to serve as or to focus on your career and your personal development. And you should have more than one mentor. One mentor, just one person cannot fulfill all of your needs or give you all of the insight about all of the things, no matter how smart they might think that they are or how experienced they might think they are. So as you think about your advisor and your mentor, I want you to make sure that you are clear about what role you're asking or what role you are expecting this person or these people to serve for you. All right. So what I'd like for you to do here is we're going to have some small group discussion. This is an opportunity for us to get to know each other as a community, as well as to share some of our thoughts about what is a good advisor. And I want you to think about the ABCs of the advising experience. Think back to your best advising experience. What was that like? This is a session, yeah, if you didn't know, that we're going to ask you to reflect and maybe even to write down some thoughts or some journal ideas. Think back to your best advising experience, whether you were the advisor or you were the advisee. What made that experience beneficial or so meaningful to you? And what did the advisor, what were their attitudes? What were some of their behaviors? What were some of their characteristics that you think are contributed to this experience being one that was beneficial for you? So as you get ready for that, Ricardo is going to give us some or break us out into some breakout rooms. So think about, what is your best advising experience? How many of you think that you've been a provider of a best advising experience? Oh, nobody's raising their hand. Oh, okay, one. Oh, goodness. Okay, maybe. Right. Y'all are so modest. Either modest or unsure.
So
So
I
as,
have,
go
I have
ahead.
rooms whenever you're ready.
Okay. So right now we want you to take a few minutes to have some discussion about, let's see, where are we with time? About 7 minutes or so to engage in some discussion with your small group about what is a good advisor? What are some of those ABCs? What are the attitudes or behaviors or characteristics that that advisor may have demonstrated to you that let you know that that this was a good experience for you? Join your breakout rooms right now, and we'll call you back in about 7 minutes.
Everyone should be back now.
Hey, everybody. How was your discussion? What were some of the ABCs? Tell me about some of the attitudes or behaviors or characteristics that you thought were meaningful for you in your advising relationships.
I pulled three that I think summarize our group's discussion.
Okay.
And, Mel would make the point of, helping you to get to that place where you're really investing in your research. It's what matters. And to get you to that place would also help you see beyond the horizon, right? That,
Mhm,
you can do this, you want to leave an impact, what that's going to be.
mhm,
The second one, which Min had brought up, was to say that, that they're interested, invested in you and providing you with opportunity, but also helping you to take ownership of your own destiny. And what I mean by that is to say, well, this is an opportunity. It might lead to this path. Is that the path you want to go on? And let's talk about that, pros and cons. And
Mhm.
Lara at the end brought up how to create an environment where you feel comfortable that you can come to your advisor with any sort of issue, right? With any sort of question, and not be afraid to raise any of those. So I
Mhm.
think all of us in our group resonated with those, and I'll stop there because we had a lot of time.
Good, thank you. Anybody else want to share their discussion or? Nope. All right, let's keep it going then. So we've talked a little bit about what good advisors are, what advisors, what roles advisors serve, as well as what good advisors do, or how they be, how they are. And one of the things that I want to acknowledge is that advisor relationships can change with time. We all know of how the doctoral, the graduate education process. You're not the same person that you start at the as you started your program as you end your program, and so your advisors, the relationship that you have with your advisor shifts and changes and morphs. And so we want to be mindful of those shifts and those changes, especially as we're navigating these relationships. We're navigating these relationships because they are indeed relationships between two or more people. And so knowing that as time progresses, we're all changing, we're growing, we're unfolding, you're learning more about yourself or your environment, you're clarifying your values, and you bring all of that to your advising relationship. So when we think about how the advising relationship changes over time, I want you to think about these phases of doctoral education. And we're Grover calls them doctoral education, but I would argue, or we would argue, that this is not just applicable to doctoral education. It's definitely applicable. These stages are applicable to graduate education, and I think to life in general. So let's talk about some of them. The first stage is exploration. And this is your first year. You are excited about being in this graduate program. You are learning about you've gotten an email from Jimmy or from one of the program coordinators that has said you are assigned to X person and they are going to be your guide, and you have stars. You are excited. We're excited for you. And this is that first year excitement, that first year exploration, where you're learning, where students are learning what it means to be X or to be in X program. You're also starting to develop a little bit of your own agency here, where you recognize that while I have an advisor and I have these resources around me, some of this is also within my control. I am the ultimate sort of the book stops with me. The engagement stage number two, or phase number two, is the stage of engagement. And this is your second year. And by the second year, you've got this. You've gotten a little bit better at managing your time. You've gotten a little bit better at figuring out what some of your needs might be, or being able to articulate those and even admit that you have needs, or admit that you need some help. And you reached out to your advisor here to help you with that. And then now you're starting to develop some synergy. You've gone from that exploration of wanting to do all the things. I want to teach all the classes, and I want to take all the classes, and I want to participate in all the research projects, to starting to think about who you are, what you want to do, and how what you're doing is synergistic with who you are. The next phase is, the next phase is phase three, is the consolidation phase. And in the consolidation phase, you have a good sense of the field, whatever field you are entering now. And you kind of get a sense of what some of the potential options might be in the field. You're learning about the literature, you're learning about norms and values of the field. And so here in this time, your job is to consolidate what you know. This is think about it as post comprehensive exams for doctoral students, or as for master students. You are about to enter into your professional realm. The last stage, or the last phase, is the stage of entry. And this is you are graduating and you are about to leave your program. You are embarking on that next step, that next phase, that next part of your journey. And so as we think about these phases, of exploration to entry. An advisor definitely can be helpful to you as you progress or as students progress during these different stages. For you, what would you say is the stage that you might think that you would need an advisor the most? Drop that in the chat. While you're dropping that in the chat, I want us to go ahead and get to the next thing. And I mentioned this before, but I think sometimes we forget that advising is a relationship. Most of you are all over 18, and according to my mama, that would make you grown. And so you have your own mind. You have your ability to make your own decisions. You know, or you are developing, getting to know who you are at your core. You are starting to explore or have explored what your values are. You've kind of started to identify your own ABCs of yourself. And so you are engaging in a relationship with another person. And just as in good relationships, in good relationships, there are some major considerations for good relationships. And those core values might be related to connection and communication, some regular interaction, some respect, respect for my personal identity and who I am, respect for independence. And again, these are not just characteristics of the students or the advisee, but these are also characteristics of the advisor, because again, we're both in relationship here. So it's not a parental relationship where it's my way or the highway as the advisor, but it's also a mutual understanding of, I've been here, I kind of know what the requirements are for you to get to where you want to go. So let me give you some advice here. But ultimately, that advice is yours to take. But at the same time, you're recognizing that this person that is sitting before you as the advisee is a fully formed, a full human being that clearly made the choice and the decisions to get here. So as you are engaged in these relationships, I want you to remember that they are indeed, we want you to remember that they are indeed relationships. Sometimes anybody that's been through a breakup knows that, you know, sometimes relationships don't always work out. And there's some times where advisors and even advisees can miss the mark. So what we'd like for you to do now is kind of take it back to the Jamboard and tell us a little bit about what are some of the ways that advisors can miss the mark. What's happened in your experience, or what have you definitely observed from others' experience? Because most of us have had good ones. React personally, being driven by ego, take offense, being overly critical, where it's slow, yep, not listening or responding, letting pride getting in the way, some ego here, it my way or the highway, I know how to do this, critical, non-responsiveness and ego, okay. Did y'all all have the same advisor, or was this different advisor? Making assumptions, yes. One size advising is not responsive to the student. Absolutely, absolutely. That is definitely one of the major downfalls of, I think, of advising. We wanted to treat all students the same, or all relationships the same. And we know that that's not the case. Thank you for engaging in that. So there are a number of ways, as you've indicated here, that advisors can miss the mark. And unfortunately, fortunately, we spent most of our time thinking about what role the advisors serve in this relationship. But what about the other partner here in this relationship? What are some of the expectations of advisees? What do we expect our advisees to do? So for the next 7 minutes, I'd like for you to engage in some small group discussion about what are the expectations of advisees? What are they supposed to do? What are the ABCs for advisees? We'll let you know when you have 2 minutes to come back. And here's to some fruitful discussion.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Do you want to take it, Dr. Bertrand? Do you want me to? Okay.
So you had a chance to talk about some of the expectations of advisees. Tell me some of those that may have come up in your group. What should an advisees, attitudes, behaviors, characteristics, what does that look like? You can definitely drop it in the chat, or you can unmute and give us.
We talked a little bit about, and this is more of like attitudes, right? That the relationship is reciprocal, and that, you know, as faculty, we can't always anticipate or, you know, come up with what the needs or expectations of students are. And as such, there's sort of, you know, some ownership that has to be on the part of the advisee as well. Whether that's through communication or sort of letting those expectations be known, but that, you know, it sort of works back and forth, right?
It definitely does. Definitely does. So let's talk about, here is some technical difficulties. There we go. It is definitely a bit back and forth in negotiation, as with any relationship. So what happens when you might need to break up? When this relationship doesn't quite work so well? When you might not be vibing, or your student or the advisee or even your advisor has ghosted you? Whew, that's a dating term I've heard. So what happens when these advising relationships don't work? What should you do then? So there are a number of ways, just like in good relationship management, that you can also manage your advising relationship. And so part of it is having some honest and open conversation, because it is a relationship and it's slightly different from an interpersonal relationship in that most of us are in education because we are committed to lifelong learning in a variety of ways. And so I know that most of my colleagues, and I'll just speak for us, and y'all can, you know, add in the chat if you disagree with me, but I think most of us would like to know if we're not doing something in the right way, if there is something that we, if there was some unintentional way, some unintentional bias, some implicit bias that we're operating within, some blind spots that we are allowing to color our interactions with students. And so I would want to make sure that as you're thinking about dismantling this relationship, that you would communicate what is and what was not working for you in this relationship. And there are multiple ways that you can do that. I know that there's definitely a power imbalance that you're thinking about, like, I don't want to tell the advisor that they were microaggressive to me, but we need to know that. We need to know this information. We need to know that these were ways that were problematic or triggering for you. And so I would encourage you to definitely have almost like an exit meeting with your advisor, or at least an exit email with your advisor, opening that door to communication. Don't just not engage. Don't just turn up with another advisor. You're thinking, that happened to me before. I was like, okay. Well, all right then. And I didn't know what I did wrong in that relationship. I don't know what need was not being met, and so that was a gap for me that was still to this day isn't filled. So I don't know. So I would encourage you to make sure that you are engaging in these conversations with your advisor and advisees. Also, many of us want things to work, and so we will try. We will try our best to make relationships work. And I think that's admirable for all of us, because we try, we want to adjust. We might hear some feedback that requires some adjustment. And as a part of that adjustment, sometimes you fall short on that adjustment, or that adjustment just does not fit who you are as an individual. And it's okay for these for us to discontinue our advising relationships. Again, the advising relationship in this case, while the advisor may hold a position of power, the student is the main driver of this relationship here. So if you are not getting your needs met, if you have communicated this, if you are making sure that your advisor, after talking about expectations with your advisor, that there's still some gaps there, then I would encourage you to think about changing advisors. As advisors, while we want to know what we've done wrong, at the same time, we recognize that things happen, and often relationships we might be very compatible on paper. Has this ever happened to anybody? You're really compatible on paper. Maybe your online dating profiles really matched, but then when you actually matched, it just didn't work. So you can feel free to have a conversation with your advisor to say, I think I would like to engage in a different relationship. At the same time, if there's an advisor that you would like to have a relationship with, then it's almost like that for many of you have likened asking someone to serve on your committee as asking to go to the prom. All of these relationship metaphors here, so y'all just forgive me. It's after Valentine's Day. So and engaging in a new relationship with an advisor is just the same. Talking about what are some of your goals, what are some of your expectations, and how you can help to manage those things.
Something just while this really frames around, a change is necessary because maybe certain things aren't working, just as was sort of alluded to, there might be a situation where some other advisor will be a better fit because of research interests or other compatibilities. And so thinking about how to also navigate that processes where maybe a current advisor, it works sufficiently enough, but maybe there's another advisor who could work better, and how to still navigate that process and think about, is there still feedback that's necessary and how to approach that?
Mm-hmm. Advisors or someone who has navigated that change process. What did that look like for you? Stacy, Stacy.
So I had somebody within the last 3 or 4 years who was assigned to me as my temporary advisee. And I feel pretty strongly that when you start here, even though we do make an effort to match you with people who have your research, similar research interests, that kind of first couple of years is really, you're still temporary. We may not call it temporary, but you all are in this process of exploration. And, as we just talked about. And so I had a student who decided to go to, who she wanted to do more anthropology. So it was a better fit. And so I think, I could kind of see it coming. So when she came to me and said she wanted to switch, it wasn't a surprise, but at the same time, I was happy for her. To be fair, it always feels a little bit weird But I think that temporary, I was still her temporary. I think where it starts to get tricky is when we've invested a lot of time, for example, in the prospectus, and it happens at that phase. And I can't remember when that, if that's happened to me, but that, like, post exams, if you've invested a lot of time in this with the student and then they switch to somebody else, that's when it starts to be more of a burn. So I don't know what other people's experiences are.
Any others that have had this situation? How did you navigate it?
I think for me, it's having the conversation early on when the student comes in and making it clear that in 2 years from now, I don't have to be your advisor. And I think that's the part that the student feels like you got me, you stuck with me. To Dr. Roach's point, that is, we don't feel that way. The other part of it is this personal aspect, is if I leave my advisor, they're going to take it personally. And I can't speak for all of my colleagues in the department, but we want you to do what's best for you and move you along in progress. And if that is working with another faculty member and you are finding support and you have built a relationship, we are not going to take that personally. We want you to be successful and do what you need to do. And I think us minimizing that feeling of, oh, they're going to not like me, or they're going to take this personally, as much as we as advisors can minimize that, and reminding them that, maybe you're not getting what you need out of this mutual relationship, and where can you get what you need, and having constant check-ins around that might demystify some of that, like, oh, I'm stuck with them for the rest of my time here.
Exactly. I would agree with you. Anybody navigated that relationship change or that shift? Any students, any advisees done that? And how did that, what did that feel like for you, or how did you navigate that? Anybody?
I did it when I was a student. The person I ended up graduating with is not the person I originally started working with. And I just felt like I wasn't getting the support that I needed in the way that I needed. And I talked with my Stella, who ended up becoming my advisor. I worked with her on a project, and, to her credit, she actually did the conversation for me with my other advisor and asked me what I wanted to share, and we kind of closed things up. So
most of these changes do work, and they turn out positively, because, as Cameron mentioned, most of us are all about wanting to make sure that you get the best experience, despite some of the ways that we can miss the mark with our egos, as you all mentioned, in the ways that advisors miss the mark. So we need to figure out, as advisors, how we can better manage that and communicate that you are more than welcome. This is an open relationship. If you have others that you would, okay, I'm taking this metaphor just way too far. All right, let's go on to the next thing. Let's go on to the next thing. So we've decided that we've kind of gone through the gamut of what advising looks like, or the expectations. How do we manage those expectations? How do we manage them when they're not working, even when they are working? So how can we make advising relationships work for both advisees and advisors? Because, like relationships, this should be a mutually beneficial relationship. This is a reciprocal, this is an exchange. We are both engaging in, hopefully, a learning process and a growing process. So how can we make sure that this process is one that is beneficial for both advisors and advisees? What do you think about that? What's something that you think that you could commit to helping to make your advising relationships better?
So something that comes to me is that how often is an advising advisor sort of connecting in general? So I know there are situations when your advisor is also a supervisor for a position you hold, or you're already doing research with them outside of the advisor relationship, or they're a professor and you see them regularly regardless. And it's easy to sort of feel like if you're, and that's definitely a positive because I imagine will be more connected. I think the challenge then comes because you're meeting regularly or at least engaging to make sure there's still time and space dedicated to still discussing like advisee topics. I think it's easy to feel like, okay, like we meet regularly, we're talking about general things, and maybe there's indirectly discussions about advisory stuff, but I think committing to doing that explicitly is helpful. On the flip side, if you are with an advisor or advisee when you don't see each other regularly or there's more of a distance there, how to make sure that there's still regular engagement, just so that you all know what's going on within each other's lives or like the progression through your education, just so that there's that commitment and the relationships there.
Great point, Ricardo. Is serving in multiple roles. Oftentimes one, usurps the other, especially as an advisor if we're seeing each other. Yes, these are definitely things to make sure that we're considering. Min, you raised your hand. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, I just had a question. More of it just came to my mind when we talked about like breakup relationships, and like I feel like maybe this is more of an individual basis, like this line for like a personal and professional between advisor and advisees. Like I have a feeling that usually is like the advisor. I know everybody has a different style, like the advisor setting the boundaries, or people are just guessing like how personal this relationship goes, or strictly professional. Like I feel like there's always a line there that's kind of hard to get.
How would you suggest navigating that? Or is that a question? Is that what you're asking?
Oh yeah, that was more of a question.
Okay. Is there anybody that would like to contribute to that? Darren? Okay, Darren.
Yeah, well, so I think, like the advice that I would say to how to make these relationships between advisees and advisors work better and keep them professional and like kind of that weird like personal gray area is like communication and being honest of like what I want out of an advisor from my advisor, and my advisor being relatively real with me of what she can give me at the current stage that I'm at. And so that expectation is clear, and then that way we both have an understanding of how this relationship works.
Thank you, Darren. So going back to communication, and I'm gonna go back to my relationship metaphor and thinking about the unspoken things. I really would like for us to connect in this way, or I would really like for you to take me on a date. Can you take me on a date? Having that discussion with your advisor about how more personal or how less personal would this like to be? Maybe there was some discomfort or uncomfort in some of the line that might have been crossed. Maybe they got a little too personal with you. And I think there's some ways that in terms of our communication and as you engage with them further, that you can restore that boundary if it was crossed. Darren?
And I also just want to encourage like my fellow peers and students to like advocate for yourself. If you feel like you need something from your advisor that you're not getting, be vocal about that. And then if that advisor can't give you that, maybe there's somebody else who can give you that bandwidth, or maybe it's a mentor, or maybe it's a fellow student. But to just really advocate for what you need, because like this is our time in the program. This is when we're only going to have this amount of time just to focus on one thing. So to make sure that it's a really enriching experience and we're getting kind of the resources and support that we need.
Mm-hmm. Perfect way, Darren, I think, of putting it in that this is your relationship. This is your process. So how can you ensure that you are getting what it is that you need? I also like to think about this as practice for the future. Many of us have been in professional situations where we've endured sort of treatment that was detrimental to our mental, our physical health, or our emotional health. And so in thinking about using this as sort of practice for you as you go on, as you are in that fourth stage of entry into your professional lives, being able to articulate to yourself as well as to someone else how their behavior is making you feel, or what are the things that you need that you might not have articulated initially. And as that as your stage changes in the program, again, you may need different things. And so being open, having that open communication and treating your advisees with respect and dignity. Ricardo?
Yeah, Rose brought up a good point about developing some kind of cluster model where advisees are connected and potentially meeting with each other, or there's a group component of it, which can also just be helpful both from the advisor standpoint, but also from the advisee standpoint, where, you know, if you're learning from fellow advisees that maybe a certain approach, or they're able to achieve certain dynamics in the relationship that you're looking to achieve, you can learn from them, especially if they've, you know, had a longer relationship. So I think just having that perspective is helpful.
Mm-hmm. I like that, the group advising. We would also encourage you to reach out to, if you are trying to figure out how to navigate your relationship with your advisor, reach out to your fellow advisees and of that advisor and see how they've navigated. They might be able to give you some insight or some suggestions, some advice on how to best navigate them, especially if they've been in relationship with them a little bit longer. And if there are commonalities in your experiences that you think need to be addressed, then for sure, we would encourage you to have that discussion with your advisor. If you also don't feel comfortable doing that, then that's what we are here for in terms of departmental leadership. Dr. Akiba and myself, as well as each of the program coordinators, are available to you to have discussions about what you are getting or what you're not getting, and your relationships with your advisor. So you can feel free to have those discussions with us. And to the extent that you need us or want us to keep that confidential, know that we can. We would like to make sure that we have enough to be able to improve that relationship for you. But if this is just a discussion, or, you know, a hypothetical situation or conversation you need to have with us, we're here to engage in that with you. We're going over a little bit of time, but I think this discussion hopefully has been fruitful for you. There are a couple of things that are going to come next. In the coming weeks, we'll have this wonderful kind of handout for you, this one-pager takeaway. And in that takeaway, there'll be some resources related to advising and the scholarship of advising. There'll also be some videos or blog posts or websites, other media resources that might be helpful to you as well as you're navigating these relationships. So we would encourage you to access that. We'll make sure to share this recording as well as that one pager when it becomes available. But we thank you so much for being with us today and hope that this was helpful for you.